The Forgotten Minotaur King. Side Story: The Journey of Kind. Part 2. Kind rotated his shoulder to test if it had been healed properly, given the rushed restoration poultices the medics used after his first fight with the Tsukio Knight. He hoisted his hammer and sword and prepared for his battle in the Alazan Tournament of Might. His opponent, the guy the halfling thugs warned him to take a dive to, was a lean, muscular human of immense height. He wore a striking black three-piece suit, complete with tightly buttoned dress shirt. However, upon his face was a bright red and blue, lightning-patterned, skin-tight mask, covering his entire head, with large holes cut into it for eyes, nose, and mouth. The strange warrior stood silently before the much taller and well-armed Minotaur, arms akimbo on his hips. The tournament announcers called out in a heavy Alazandian accent that the man's name was El Sueño. Upon hearing his name, the man raised a single hand and in a swift motion ripped his entire suit, pants, and dress shirt from his body, revealing a bronzed and oiled hairless chest. He lowered his stance into a posture ready to pounce, as Kind put his hammer and sword in a defensive pattern. The stadium was silent, except for wolf whistles from a few painted ladies in the stands, seated between two sharply dressed halflings, one flipping a coin and the other chewing a toothpick. El Sueño dashed for Kind. When he grew near, Kind took the offensive and swung his hammer, only for El Sueño to slide beneath the swing and between Kind's legs. Once behind the Minotaur, El Sueño grabbed Kind's hooves and yanked them from underneath him, bringing the Minotaur face down into the dirt. El Sueño held Kind's legs in a locked hold and was twisting them in a way that would surely break them if given enough time. Bet you wish you took the deal now, muchacho? Not succumbing to the taunt, Kind hoisted himself on his forearms and brayed heavily as he kicked his legs loose of the grappler's grasp, quickly turning around and charging horns first into the now seated El Sueño, goring the wrestler in the waist but not ceasing his charge. Kind carried the screaming El Sueño clear across the stadium and smashed him into the walls. El Sueño slumped against the wall, leaving a bright streak of blood down the side. And for good measure, Kind took his sword by the blade for only a second and battered the handle against the fallen fighter's head. The non-lethal blow left the human crumpled in a pile. Looking directly above at the stands he had demolished El Sueño in front of, he saw a very angry pair of halflings ushering out a flock of ladies. While massaging his legs and hoof in the back area of the arena, Kind was approached by the Usagi-Hito bunny girl, Senshi, who he fought in the first round. Thinking she was here to either congratulate him on his win or officially have her sisterhood of Tsukio Knights pledge to aid him in the defense of Goldenrod, he greeted her warmly. However, upon her worried expression, he tensed. She told him her knights were preparing for the journey back to Kintsugi, but she overheard a pair of short men discussing taking out a Minotaur. She followed by explaining that they were members of a crime organization headed by a mysterious but immensely powerful evil being known as Gambrone d'Amberduto, and if his life was in danger, Kind should join them and get out of town. He pondered her warning and weighed it against his need for aid, but before he could come to a conclusion, rounding a corner were the coin-flipping and toothpick-chewing halflings. Senshi gave Kind a bow and whispered the location of the Tsukio travel carts. Then she was on her way.
We tried to be nice and offer you a deal. Yet you disrespect our guy. Else when you're like that?
The coin flipper grabbed his change piece from the air in a violent gesture Kind assumed was supposed to be intimidating. Picking up his sword from the ground and resting it against his shoulder, Kind towered over the very small humanoids, neither of which dropped their confidence and menacing look that was plastered across their faces. The toothpicked one reached into his pinstripe suit pocket and produced a carton of what looked like his signature toothpicks, while the coin flipper held his doubloon and aimed it at the ground between them and Kind. Light from a wall sconce glared off of it and reflected an ornate symbol onto the ground that began to burn its imprint into the very stone. Suddenly, the earth below began to erupt as skeletal arms broke the surface and emerged from the ground. It was at this time a number of staff and other competitors cleared the rest area as to avoid this unsanctioned violence. Now, before Kind, stood 7 or 8 bare bones, naked skeletons, most human, and one possibly a dracokin of some kind, all average height. Slightly worried, but not fearing his odds, Kind knelt down and retrieved his hammer to complete his set. Now it was Toothpick Chewer's turn. Taking 7 or 8 toothpicks from his case, he tossed them in the air above the skeletons and snapped his fingers in a gesture mimicking guns. As the skeletons reached up in unison and grabbed the picks and came down with heavy, long-barreled, and wide-chambered firearms.
Rattle 'em, boys!
Coin Flipper snickered as they opened fire with a volley so fast Kind didn't have time to duck behind the bench he was seated on before taking 3 in the back. His arm was in so much pain he nearly dropped his sword as he ran in the direction Senshi had left earlier. Rounding the corner as these rattling boys advanced, he ducked out of the large rear bay doors of the tournament arena, leaving a trail of blood as he ran. Using this to his advantage, as soon as he was clear of the doors, he doubled back and hid against a wall. As the barrel of one of the automatic guns peered out, he swung his hammer and heard the satisfying sound of a skull crumbling and a pile of bones clattering to the ground, followed by the thunk of the gun joining them. However, 2 more guns sprouted from the doorway and blind fired around the corner he was standing at seconds before. With this swing, he heard the pulverization of pelvic bones as the second and third rattling boys fell. Now he took off around the building, where he was met with another peculiar sight. The Tsukio Knights' mounts and carts. However, they weren't pulled or carried by horses nor rhino as Kind himself preferred. Their pack animals were large reptiles, some bipedal and others on all fours. Senshi turned and greeted him while mounted on one with a duck-like bill and large reverse head crest. Just as the halflings and the 5 remaining skeletons rounded the corner. Senshi grabbed Kind by the arm and hoisted him onto her Parasaurolophus, with a yelp escaping the Minotaur. They began to run, along with all the other prepared knights, protecting their rear, some with massive shields, and others with armored dinosaur hides. To be continued. Hi, my name is Matthew Lewis, and I do the voice of Kaisel Bakshi, along with all the additional voices in The Forgotten Minotaur King. I hope you enjoy the podcast and continue to listen into the future. If you want to support my content, please donate to my Patreon, Matthew Lewis Podcasts. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Matthew Lewis Podcasts, all one word. Follow me on Twitter at Matthew Lewis P. Or leave a positive maximum star review on your podcast app of choice. If you found this podcast, I assume you're familiar enough with the genre to know how important reviews are to the survival of a channel. And I hope you recommend this to your friends. Or if you didn't like it, you could recommend it to your enemies, and I'll teach them a lesson. Keep it sleazy, folks, and thank you.